Imagine this, you walk away from everything, the city, the career, the burnout, for a quiet life in the mountains. You inherit a small-town bakery from the only adult who ever truly saw you. A fresh start, right? Except the very next day, the locks are changed. A crooked sign appears in the window, closed for renovations, and inside stands a woman who insists she's the rightful owner. This isn't a story about cinnamon rolls. It's about how easily we can lose what's ours, unless we stand our ground. And how strength sometimes comes not from rage, but from love and truth. I'm Nora Whitman. And if you think a sleepy mountain town means nothing but peace and pastries, you'd better sit down. This is going to be a long story. If you've ever worked in high-end hospitality, you know burnout doesn't arrive in one dramatic crash. It creeps in. Missed lunches. Sleepless nights. Smiling 12 hours straight while something inside you withers. By 32, I was a cliché, senior events director at the Harborview Grand in Chicago. 6-figure salary. Corner office. Chronic migraines. And a purpose that had vanished somewhere between guest complaints and endless meetings. And then Irene got sick. Her voice on the phone was too calm. "It's the fast kind," she said, like we were talking about the weather. "They've given me months." Maybe. I dropped everything. Flew home. Ended up in the hospice wing of St. Aurelia Medical Center, clutching a bag of lemon scones, heart pounding like it was warning me of what came next. When I stepped into her room, Irene was wrapped in a quilt that looked older than time, silver hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Nora," she whispered. "You look tired." I tried to laugh. "You're one to talk." We sat together in silence, the way people do when the clock is running down and words feel too heavy. I hadn't been back to Ridgehaven in years. Work had swallowed my summers, my weekends, everything. 6 weeks later, Irene was gone. Her lawyer, Clara Mendel, called me with the details. "She left everything to you. The bakery. The apartment above it. The recipe books. Even the cat." I couldn't speak. Finally, I said the only thing I could: "I'll come." I packed my life into boxes. Sold the condo. Walked away from the job. Everyone at the hotel thought I'd lost my mind. "You're moving to some mountain town to run a pastry shop?" my boss, Cheryl, asked, disbelief dripping from every word. "It's a bakery," I corrected. "And it's not just some town. It's Ridgehaven." What I didn't say was that Ridgehaven was the only place I'd ever felt truly seen. The only place where I wasn't just the forgotten middle child or the quiet kid in the corner. Irene didn't just bake. She created. Her kitchen was a temple of cinnamon and warmth, and I was her apprentice in something almost sacred. I learned to braid challah before I could do algebra. She let me mix batter, lick spoons, even invent scone flavors. Her mantra was always the same: food is how we say the things we don't know how to say with words. People often say someone was like a second mother. Usually it means a kind aunt who remembered birthdays. But Irene stepped in where no one else did. My parents divorced when I was 9. With my mom, I faded into the background of her new marriage. My dad lived 3 hours away and forgot I existed between child support payments. Every summer, though, Irene rescued me. She'd pull up in her old station wagon, Carole King on the radio, windows down. She wasn't my mother's sister, technically, my grandmother's youngest sibling. My great-aunt. But to me, she was simply Irene, tall, wiry, dusted with flour, and laughing like everything was survivable. One year she came 2 weeks early. Claimed she needed help at the bakery, but I think she just knew I did. I'll never forget her striding up to my school steps, handing me a cup of apple cider and saying, "Time to go somewhere with fewer sharp edges." That summer changed everything. She gave me chores, cleaning bowls, alphabetizing spices, but mostly she gave me attention. I wasn't background noise. I mattered. We built rituals, morning walks to the farmer's market where she haggled over blueberries, afternoons baking to jazz records, evenings on the dock with peach ice cream and mosquito bites we never won against. When I asked if she believed in God, she said, "I believe in sourdough. You feed it, and it grows. Faith is like that, it needs action." When I asked why she never had kids, she smiled, "Because some of us were born to raise people who technically aren't ours." By 14, she was teaching me balance, salt against acid, jam into glaze, dough with emotion, not too soft, not too tense. But her lessons weren't just about food. She noticed when I flinched at loud voices or went silent. She gave me space to exist without performing. I never called her mom. That would have been wrong. But she was the only adult who knew my favorite book, remembered the boy who broke my heart, and mailed handwritten notes when I got promoted or dumped. We wrote letters for years. Real letters with stamps. She'd send recipes, pressed flowers, or funny things customers said. I'd send glossy photos from hotel events, stories I told no one else. She understood why hospitality mattered to me. Not because it was glamorous, but because it was service. Giving tired people a place to rest. When her diagnosis came, something inside me cracked. I took a leave of absence, flew to Northwood Springs where she was being treated. Made her lemon tea she could barely drink. Played her favorite records. And the night before she slipped away, she squeezed my hand and said, "Don't run from your softness. It's your power." She always spoke in riddles. They only made sense later. So when I inherited Ember and Crust, it wasn't a shock. It felt like something I'd been training for my whole life. 6 months ago, I arrived in Ridgehaven. The air smelled of pine and rain. That first night, I sat in Irene's old apartment above the bakery, knees pulled to my chest, staring out the window and thinking, what the hell am I doing? But something deeper whispered back, "You're home." I didn't know then that Ridgehaven had changed while I was gone. And not everyone was glad I'd returned. The town looked the same, and nothing like I remembered. Pastel storefronts still lined Maplewood Lane. Flower baskets bobbed in the breeze. Kids rode bikes without helmets. Retirees loitered in front of the post office like self-appointed security guards. But something was off. The colors were the same, yet the melody felt wrong. I parked behind the bakery, my bakery, and sat gripping the steering wheel. Basil, Irene's loudmouthed orange cat, yowled in his carrier. Even he seemed unsettled. When I stepped out, I saw a crooked sign in the window, "Welcome back, Nora." Sweet, right? Except I hadn't put it there. And I had no idea who had. Inside, Ember and Crust smelled stale, old wood, and used flour, the ghost of cinnamon. I stood in the middle of the shop, taking it all in, the vintage mixer Irene swore was better than anything new, the chalkboard menu still carrying her last specials in her handwriting. I thought I'd feel peace. Instead, I felt watched. That first week was full of awkward run-ins. At the hardware store, Mrs. Adler clucked, "You back for good, or just flipping the place?" At the market, a man I barely recognized squinted, "Didn't think the big city would let you go." At first, I explained, "No, I wasn't selling. No, I didn't hate the town. No, I wasn't here to open a chain cafe." But the more I spoke, the clearer it became, they weren't asking. They were warning. Irene hadn't just been a baker, she'd been Ridgehaven's grandmother. People brought her secrets, grief, celebrations. They trusted her. And somehow, by inheriting the bakery, I'd inherited her place in their story. But I wasn't her. And then there was Tessa. Tessa Monroe, 28. Daughter of Irene's best friend, once her apprentice. As kids, we played together during my summer visits, but the gap widened. She stayed in Ridgehaven, helped at the bakery when Irene's health declined, and openly told people she expected to inherit it. She called herself the spiritual heir. She showed up on my second afternoon, just as I was scrubbing baseboards. The screen door creaked, and there she was, arms folded, apron dusted with flour, wearing that half-smile I remembered from childhood. "Didn't expect you'd actually come back," she said. "Hi, Tessa. Good to see you too," I replied, forcing a light tone. She glanced around like checking for fingerprints. Corporate types don't usually last in towns like this. I bit the inside of my cheek. "I'm not just visiting." Tessa shrugged. "We'll see." And then she walked out, no offer to help, no welcome. Just the silence of someone who already felt replaced. Later, I learned Tessa had been working part-time at the bakery, quietly helping Irene in her final months. Maybe she thought she'd be chosen as successor, like some fairy tale heir. But the will was clear. Every document carried my name. Still, the town buzzed with speculation. Tessa talked to customers, smiled that knowing smile. She didn't need to say much, the silence worked for her. By the end of week 2, 3 different townspeople had told me, gently but pointedly, tradition matters here and some folks don't take kindly to outsiders coming back just to change things. I hadn't changed anything. I'd barely begun. I told myself it was growing pains, that once people saw I wasn't here to bulldoze Irene's soul, they'd come around. If I worked hard, baked well, kept her spirit alive, Ridgehaven would welcome me back. I was wrong. I reopened Ember and Crust with a soft launch, blueberry muffins, French press coffee, and crossed fingers. Irene's old jazz records played on the speaker. A beeswax candle flickered in the window. I even wore the floral apron she swore was lucky. By 7:03 a.m., 3 customers had come in. 2 left with polite nods. 1 gave a tight smile and bought nothing. By 9 o'clock, Tessa arrived. Not as a customer. As an oracle. She slipped behind the counter like she'd never left, tying on an apron I recognized from Irene's drawer. "Thought you could use a hand," she said. Part of me wanted to refuse. But I was knee-deep in sticky batter, running on fumes, and my old people-pleasing reflexes kicked in. I nodded. That's when it began. At first she was helpful. Too helpful. Sliding trays into the oven without asking. Rearranging the coffee setup mid-shift. Each move punctuated with, "just doing it the way Irene liked," and a smile that never reached her eyes. But it was her words to customers that cut deepest. "She's still finding her rhythm," she told Mrs. Keaton, who wondered why the cinnamon knots tasted different. "Corporate kitchens don't usually prep from scratch." "She's really trying," she whispered to another. "But you know how it is. City folk, bless their hearts." To an older gentleman, she leaned in, "I was here every day for Irene's last 3 months. Some of us already are part of this place." When the rush finally ended, I pulled her aside. "Tessa, I appreciate the help. But if we're going to work together, I need communication. And support. Not commentary." Her eyes went cold. "Oh, I'm sorry. Just trying to help. Didn't realize honesty was off the menu." That afternoon, I opened the fridge and found the sourdough starter gone. I turned the place upside down. Nothing. It was Irene's original starter, fed for decades, carrying a tang no supermarket yeast could mimic. I searched every shelf, even the compost bin. Nothing. I didn't accuse anyone. Not at first. But the next day, it was back. Sitting on the counter, like it had never vanished. Minutes later, Tessa walked in, humming. "You find it?" she asked sweetly. I nodded. "Yeah. Just, sitting there." Her smile widened. Must have been one of Irene's little miracles. And then she strolled into the kitchen like she owned it. That night, I stood alone in the bakery and cried into a mixing bowl. It wasn't just about sourdough. It was the gaslighting. The undermining. The sense that every kind thing Tessa did came with a hook hidden inside. This place was supposed to heal me. Instead, it was becoming a minefield. By the 3rd week, I started hearing my own name in conversations I wasn't part of. At the feed store, I heard she's already planning to sell to some chain. At the cafe across from the library, she never even baked when Irene was alive. Just posed for photos. Everywhere I went, whispers followed like a dress train I couldn't shake off. It didn't take much to guess the source. Tessa had started hosting her own pop-up stands across the street on Fridays: cinnamon twists, old-fashioned pies, lemon cookies labeled Irene's recipe in thick calligraphy. She never said my name. She didn't need to. She cast herself as the one keeping the flame alive, while I was the outsider experimenting. She began calling herself Irene's apprentice. Technically true, but when paired with lines like "I was here when it mattered" or "I know what Irene would have wanted," it cut deep. I tried to stay above it. But when customers asked if I was really turning the shop into a brunch cafe with kombucha on tap, I knew I had to respond. I taped a sign to the window. Ember and Crust remains a scratch bakery rooted in Irene Whitman's legacy. No corporate takeovers. No franchise plans. Just one woman, her aunt's recipes, and a whole lot of heart. Nora. It helped a little. Some regulars stopped looking at me like I was about to bulldoze the place. But the undercurrent never fully faded. And Tessa kept pushing. One morning, I found her reorganizing the spice rack, unasked. "I thought I'd make it easier," she said. "You had cinnamon next to paprika." "It's always been alphabetical," I answered tightly. "Irene's system." "Well, she let me do it my way toward the end," Tessa shrugged. "Said it saved time." I knew she was lying. Irene never changed systems. She taught you hers, or you were out. But how do you argue with someone rewriting history as fact? The final straw came 2 days later. I caught her in the back office, scrolling through receipts and supply orders. "I was just checking if you were still using Goldenfield Mills," she said, unbothered. "Irene always liked them." "You're not staff," I snapped. "You don't have access to this space." She blinked, then gave a long, deliberate sigh. "Wow. Okay. Message received." And she walked out, apron still tied. That night, flyers appeared around town. Save Honey and Hearth. Support local traditions. Support community stewards. Pop-up bake sale across from Maplewood Library, Friday 8 a.m. With real Irene recipes. No name. No mention of me. Just a message as sharp as glass under bare feet. This wasn't tension anymore. It was war. And I had no idea how to win without becoming the villain everyone already suspected I was. I didn't sleep the night before the lock incident. The bakery felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by tension. Every corner carried a question I couldn't answer. Every glance felt like a verdict. I kept trying to win hearts with baking. Lavender shortbread. Plum tarts. Even Irene's forgotten spice honey scones. But no recipe could outbake the rumors. Across the street, Tessa's pop-up had a chalkboard sign. Irene's table, for those who remember what real tradition tastes like. Subtle as a knife between the ribs. Still, I told myself I could fix this. Host a community morning. Free coffee. Open doors. Show them I wasn't an outsider. I never got the chance. That Sunday before sunrise, my key didn't work. I tried it 3 times before noticing the lock itself. New. Brass. Gleaming. Alarm bell. Then a paper taped to the glass. Temporarily closed for renovation, management change pending. Handwritten. Sloppy. Rushed. And inside, movement. Someone was in the bakery. My chest locked. I called the sheriff with numb fingers. Reporting a robbery where nothing was stolen except belonging. Deputy Calder arrived 20 minutes later. Tessa opened the door like she'd been expecting him. Paint can in one hand, not an ounce of shame in her eyes. "This isn't what it looks like," she said. "Oh?" My voice was hollow. "Because it looks like you changed the locks on my business and wrote yourself into a fantasy." "I was just helping," she snapped. "Everyone agrees this place needs a refresh. You've been floundering." She doesn't have permission to be here, I told the deputy, pulling the deed from my bag. I'd started carrying it everywhere, half superstition, half survival. I own this place. She changed the locks without consent. Tessa's face flickered. This bakery belongs to the town. Not just one person. You've been gone for years. You don't know what it means to people here. I know what it meant to Irene, I whispered. She left it to me. Deputy Calder nodded. This is technically a civil matter. But based on the deed and the changed locks, Ms. Whitman has full rights. I suggest you leave, ma'am. Immediately. Tessa didn't argue. She didn't beg or look sorry. She slammed the paint can down so hard it splattered across the tile. You're ruining everything, she hissed. And then she walked out. Just like that. But that wasn't the end. It was the end of pretending we weren't enemies. I stayed in the bakery alone that afternoon. Cleaned up the paint. Changed the lock again. Then sat on the floor where sunlight used to fall, when Irene and I sang Billie Holiday as the dough rose. I cried. Not from fear, from loss. Not of the bakery, but of the illusion that good intentions would be enough. That day, I stopped hoping for peace. I started preparing for battle. The Monday after Tessa broke in, Ridgehaven felt like a different town. Or maybe it had always been that way, and I'd just been too blind to see it. Flyers were everywhere, taped to poles, pinned on bulletin boards, tucked under windshield wipers. Save Honey and Hearth, support local ownership. Keep Irene's legacy in the right hands. Sign the petition. Stop the sellout. No signature. But the slanted, all-caps font screamed Tessa. I tore one down, folded it into my pocket, and drove home in silence. Upstairs, Basil flicked his tail like he could feel the tension in my bones. I wanted to scream. Instead, I baked. Angrily. Grief turned into flour-dusted fury. I mixed lemon into batter like a knife twist. Piped meringue like every swirl was a rebuttal. But rage didn't quiet. The next day, sales plummeted. Customers I'd spoken with a week ago walked past without looking in. Morning rush, usually a dozen regulars, shrank to 2 teenagers and a lost hiker. Even vendors pulled back. When I called about my fruit delivery, they said there'd been a mix-up and rerouted my order to Tessa's stall. She's not a business, I said flatly. She doesn't even have a license. We're just trying to stay out of drama, the vendor replied. Easy for them to say. They didn't have to walk past a chalkboard reading. Fresh. Local. Familiar. No city strings attached. It didn't stop there. The Ridgehaven Chronicle, circulation maybe 400, ran an op-ed, When Legacy Meets Greed, Who Should Hold the Hearth? No names mentioned. But the subtext rang like a church bell. That afternoon I sat in the shop with an untouched scone, watching condensation trail down the windows. I didn't even have the energy to cry. Just flattened. Like someone had rolled me into a paper doll. That night, I dreamed of Irene. She stood in the bakery, back to me, humming Etta James while dusting powdered sugar over madeleines. I tried to speak, but no words came. Hands trembling, I watched her disappear into the light as the door swung shut. I woke gasping. Basil curled up my feet. Tell me what to do, Irene, I whispered into the dark. I'm losing them. No answer came. But the next day, while reorganizing the pantry, I found the journal. It wasn't hidden, just tucked behind a row of spice jars. Cinnamon, sage, nutmeg, and truth. The cover was soft brown leather, edges worn smooth. Her handwriting was unmistakable, sharp cursive, looping with confidence. Irene always wrote like someone who never needed to prove herself. I sank onto the kitchen stool, heart thudding, and opened it. Inside were recipes. Notes about adding lemon zest to peach bars, retrying a whiskey-glazed pecan loaf. But between them were fragments of reflection, wisdom she must have wanted someone to find. March 4th. Nora called today. She sounded tired, but not defeated. She never realizes how much strength she holds. She thinks strength is being loud, but it's also silence that doesn't give up. March 18th. Tessa means well, but she clings too tightly to the past. She doesn't understand that legacy isn't preservation, it's adaptation. The bakery needs someone who can hold the soul of it while letting the walls breathe. And then came the entry I wasn't ready for. April 2nd, 2 weeks before she died. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means Nora stayed. This bakery is more than flour and sugar. It's a place where people find themselves again. I chose Nora not because she's the best baker, though she'll get there, but because she knows what it's like to lose and still love. Ridgehaven will resist her. Some traditions will scream. But I trust her to make noise where I once kept peace. Let her ruffle feathers. Let her be fire and warmth both. She's my legacy, not the building. Her. Bake with joy, Berkey. And don't let anyone steal your story. I didn't realize I was crying until the tears hit my chin. Berkey, her name for me since I was 10. She only used it when she wanted me to remember I belonged to her. That entry burned into me. Not as anger. As resolve. Irene hadn't just handed me a bakery. She'd handed me a fight. So I stopped playing defense. That week, I launched something new, Tuesday tastings. Free samples. A rotating menu of recipes reimagined. Irene's apple tart, with cardamom and ginger. Her buttermilk biscuits, with sea salt and rosemary. I printed a flyer. Legacy doesn't mean frozen in time. It means baking forward, with heart. I posted a video on Instagram. Just me in the kitchen. No filters. Flour on my nose, exhaustion in my eyes. I told the story, grief, loss, trying to find home in a town that didn't remember me. It didn't go viral. But it reached the right people. That weekend, a woman I hadn't seen in 20 years walked in, Donna Reyes, who used to run the antique shop. She bought a full tray of lemon shortbread. "You were that quiet little girl with the braids," she said. "I remember you and Irene dancing in the kitchen. I should have known you were hers." I smiled. Genuinely. For the first time in weeks. Because something had shifted. They were starting to see me. But then Tessa took her war public. She filed a petition. Not a lawsuit, a challenge to declare Ember and Crust a community asset. Meaning she could block sales, renovations, even ownership changes. I called a lawyer. And I stopped hoping for peace. Now, I was ready to claim it. When I first met Amara Patel, she was drinking black coffee from a thermos shaped like a camera lens, scribbling on a half-chewed pencil. She had a kind face and a voice that cut through fluff like a knife. "Before you panic," she said, "this petition Tessa filed? It's got more holes than a spaghetti strainer." Amara reviewed the claim, that Ember and Crust should be declared a community asset under Ridgehaven's preservation zoning. If accepted, I'd still own it, but shackled. Any renovation, sale, or change would need council approval. "It's a paper shield," Amara said. "She's trying to shame you out of your own bakery." I felt sick. Can she win? Legally? No. You're airtight. But politically, she tapped her thermos. She could make your life hell. The council set a hearing for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks of new flyers. 2 weeks of whispers and side-eyes. Then came the sermon. I wasn't there, I hadn't stepped into a pew since Irene's memorial, but someone sent me the recording. Pastor Whitaker spoke about the importance of stewardship and guarding the soul of communal spaces from the hands of commerce. He never said my name. He didn't have to. By Monday, a Facebook group called Ridgehaven Keepers of the Oven had 600 members. People I hadn't spoken to in years were signing the petition. That night, I broke. Not quiet tears, the guttural sobs that shake your ribs. I cried until Basil meowed in protest, then crawled onto my chest, purring like a tractor. That's when I knew I had to answer. Not in legal terms. In truth. I opened my laptop and began typing. The truth about Ember and Crust. I wrote it like a love letter and a defense speech. I didn't name Tessa. I didn't need to. I wrote about summers with Irene. Kneading dough to music. Being the invisible middle child who, with her, was finally seen. I scanned and attached Irene's last journal entry. Nora has strength she doesn't see. This bakery isn't just flour and sugar. It's a place for reinvention. Let her build something new, even if it ruffles old feathers. I uploaded a photo of myself at 11, flour on my cheeks, Irene's arm wrapped around me, wooden spoon in her other hand. And I ended the piece. I didn't come back to Ridgehaven to sell this place or strip it of its soul. I came because Irene gave it to me. Not just the deed, but the responsibility. Not everyone has to like what I bake. But I won't apologize for carrying her legacy forward, not backward. I hit send. 2 days later, it ran on the front page. Not as an op-ed. As a feature. With the photo. With the journal entry. With the headline, Irene's Girl. And just like that, the town began to turn. Customers trickled back. A mother and daughter bought cupcakes and admitted they hadn't realized I was that Nora. Even Pastor Whitaker stopped by, murmuring that he had much to consider. The hearing was coming. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. Because I wasn't alone anymore. Town Hall in Ridgehaven looked like a courthouse from an old movie, white clapboard, peeling paint, a brass bell that only school kids ever rang. But that night, it felt like a battlefield. Folding chairs lined up in anxious rows. The whole town had come out, faces from Irene's funeral, neighbors who had signed the petition, others who still avoided my eyes in public. Even the pastor sat stiffly in the back row, hands folded like a referee waiting for a tie. Tessa was already there. And she was wearing Irene's old apron. I don't know where she found it. Maybe she took it before I even moved in. But seeing her wear it like armor made my stomach twist. She turned as I walked in, eyes flicking over my simple dress, the folder in my hand, the calm mask I'd forced on my face. Her smirk was almost pitying. I sat down at the front beside Amara, my lawyer. Composed, steady, she looked like someone who knew the chessboard better than anyone else in the room. The hearing began. Councilman Victor Sloan banged the gavel with theatrical weight and read the petition aloud. Tessa spoke first. Nostalgia dripped from her words. She painted the bakery as a sacred community space, memory, healing, tradition. She called Irene a second mother, herself a daughter of that tradition. The room hummed with approval, a few even clapped. Then Amara rose. Calm, precise, she laid out the facts, the will, the notarized deed, the business license, zoning compliance. She showed photos of vandalism, a timeline of interference. Her conclusion was blunt, this wasn't preservation. It was a personal grievance dressed up as nostalgia. The room went still. Then it was my turn. I stood, unfolded Irene's journal, and told them I hadn't wanted a fight. I only wanted to grieve, to remember her in the kitchen, not in a courtroom. But I couldn't apologize for being the person she chose. I loved her. She loved me. The bakery was my inheritance, not just in law, but in soul. I read Irene's entry aloud. When I looked up, Tessa's face was brittle, frozen in place. I told the council I wasn't trying to erase history, I was trying to carry it forward. That was what legacy meant. There was no vote that night. Only a quiet statement, they would reconvene in 1 week. But everyone in that room already knew. I had reclaimed the narrative. Outside, people shook my hand. Some apologized. Some hugged me. A few even cried. Tessa said nothing. She just walked to her car, Irene's apron balled in her fist, and drove into the dark. The official decision came 1 week later. A simple cream envelope with the Ridgehaven seal, far too plain for something that carried the weight of a war. I didn't open it right away. I brewed coffee. Sat at the table, envelope in front of me, afraid of what it would feel like to win, or worse, to lose. Finally, I sliced it open. My hands trembled, not from uncertainty, but from knowing. Petition 42B is hereby denied. Ember and Crust remains a privately owned business with full rights retained by Ms. Nora Whitman. No ceremony. No congratulations. Just 3 lines. I expected triumph. What I felt was exhaustion. It was over. No more flyers. No more smear campaigns. No more twisting Irene's name into a weapon. That night, I closed the bakery early. Sat on the kitchen floor, the same tiles where Irene once danced in socked feet, and I cried. Not the sharp grief from before. Softer this time. Like something heavy had finally let go. The town didn't throw a party. But something shifted. Customers began to return, not in a flood, but in a steady trickle. A teacher brought her class to watch cinnamon rolls rise. An older couple donated herbs from their garden for my focaccia. A high schooler asked to intern for the summer. The bakery felt alive again. Tessa stayed absent. Until one rainy Tuesday. I was sweeping the step when I noticed an envelope under the mat. No name. Inside was a recipe card, apricot sage scones, for second chances. Irene's handwriting. On the back, a yellow post-it, found this in her box. Figured you should have it. L. I didn't cry. But I baked the scones. They came out bright and earthy, crumbling just right. I put a tray on the counter with a sign, Irene's favorite, a taste of grace. And for the first time I felt something close to peace. After the verdict, Ridgehaven exhaled, quieter than I expected. The drama faded, not with a bang, but with the soft shuffle of people moving on. No more whispers. No more hesitant glances. It was as if the town had blinked and chosen to forget. But I couldn't forget. The paint stains still marked the storeroom floor from Tessa's renovation. I kept the letters, the flyers, the screenshots, not from spite, but as proof. Proof that it happened. Proof that I hadn't imagined the siege. I took long walks after closing. Past the community center. Past Tessa's old rental, now empty. I asked myself 1,000 quiet questions. What does legacy really mean? Who was I before this fight? Who am I now? Some nights, I sat on the bakery steps with Basil curled beside me, watching the windows glow gold with survival. I thought of Irene and the impossible gift she'd given me, not property, but belief. The conviction that I could hold something good. That I was worthy of it. I never saw Tessa again. Not in town. Not at the market. Rumor said she moved to another mountain town and opened her own cafe, one that looked suspiciously like the early Ember and Crust. I hoped it gave her peace. Meanwhile, I hired 2 high schoolers, Ellie and Jude. They reminded me of myself at 17, eager, awkward, brimming with ambition. I taught them the way Irene taught me, through burned batches and flower fights, through patience and praise. And every Sunday evening, I opened the kitchen for what I called grief baking. No ads. No fees. Just a space for anyone who needed to work with their hands and cry into dough without apology. Widows. Divorcees. A quiet man who had lost his daughter. And me. We made bread. We made cake. We made peace. The following month felt like spring had arrived early, not in weather, but in spirit. Something cracked open inside me. I stopped guarding the bakery like a fortress and began tending it like a hearth. We expanded Tuesday tastings. Customers voted on which samples became part of the seasonal menu. We hosted workshops, sourdough Saturdays, pie crust therapy, even a bake your breakup night that sold out in under 2 hours. People came not just for bread, but for stories. For warmth. For proof that small, handmade things still mattered in a world obsessed with speed and cheapness. And they stayed. Even Basil, the bakery's surly feline overlord, softened, allowing the occasional head scratch. Rare, but progress. One night, after locking up, I stepped outside. The mountain stood in silhouette against the darkening sky. Behind me, the bakery glowed gold through the windows. Warm. Steady. Safe. I lit a single candle in the front window. Irene's tradition. A flicker for those still trying to find their way home. And maybe, I realized, I'd finally found mine too. It's been a year since I walked back into ember and crust and found the locks changed, my name doubted. A year since I thought I might crumble under the weight of proving I belonged. And now? Now I wake to the smell of yeast and lemon zest. To the creak of old stairs. To the hum of ovens at dawn. To a life not quieter, but truer. Tessa never returned to Ridgehaven. Rumor said she opened a cafe in another mountain town, New Dawn Cafe. I like that. And Irene? She's everywhere. In the heat of the ovens. In the journals I still open on hard days. In the tiny burn scar on my wrist from remaking her lemon bundt cake for the 100th time. Sometimes I sit by the fire pit out back with a mug of tea and talk to her. Not because I think she's listening, but because it reminds me I'm still the girl she loved into strength. The bakery thrives. Not wildly. Not explosively. But steadily, like a heart that has learned how to beat again. And I'm no longer trying to prove anything. Strength, I've learned, isn't about who yells the loudest or wins the fastest. It's about who stays. Who rebuilds. Who says, this is mine. Not because I took it, but because I cherished it. That's the thing about legacy. It's not just what you inherit. It's what you fight for when no one believes in it but you. It's what you protect, not with walls, but with wisdom. And it's what you grow, patiently, imperfectly, once the fighting is done. So if you ever find yourself at the corner of Cedar Reyes Road in a quiet mountain town, look for the flickering candle in the window. It's still there. For anyone trying to find their way home.